Since Ninjago has been around for 14 years now, there is a ton of really interesting lore. So, in this video, I just wanted to go through it all. And even if you are the biggest Ninjago nerd, I can almost guarantee that you will learn at least something new, because I certainly did. So, let's just get right into it. So, thanks to Dragons Rising, we know that the 7 source dragons have always existed, and they are of course the source to all elemental power. And then at some point, the first realm forms, and then the first Ninjutsu master was somehow born, and the Onis and the dragons fought over him, so he left and created the realm crystal to travel through some of the other realms. And then at some point after that, the first Ninjutsu master arrived in a realm filled with water, caused by a giant serpent named Rojira, who had control over the elemental powers of water and wind. So he then worked together with the Meropians and the Islanders to defeat her, and they eventually did, but not without sacrifice, because Niad, the master of water at the time, merged with the seas to defeat Rojira, meaning she could never leave the ocean. And after the battle, the first Ninjutsu master gave the storm amulet to the Islanders to protect, and then the wave amulet to the Meropians. And then he went to the Temple of Light and created the golden weapons of Ninjutsu, and with those 4 weapons, he created Ninjago. And then sometime later, they only learned about this new realm, and then they created the Oni temple in Ninjago, and we don't exactly know how, but they were defeated. And once they were, the Oni warlords, 3 Oni masks, the Mask of Vengeance, the Mask of Deception, and finally, the Mask of Hatred were left behind and scattered across the land. And now we move on to the first major battle of Ninjago, called the Stone Wars. So the Overlord got drawn towards the light, so he manifested himself in the shadows of Ninjago and declares a war. And it doesn't take too long for the Overlord's corruption to spread across Ninjago, and gets challenged by the first Ninjutsu master. And to combat him, the Overlord created the Stone Army and also the Temple of Fortitude to protect against the first Ninjutsu master's golden power. And in turn, he creates the golden mech and his golden dragon to fight him. And after a long battle, the first Ninjutsu master realized that he would not be able to stop the Overlord, so he splits Ninjago into 2 parts, Ninjago and then the Dark Island, which is where the Overlord was banished to. And then at some point in the future, the Serpentine come into existence, and it is possible that the first Ninjutsu master brought them over from Chima. And then just before his 2 sons were born, he decided to give out his elemental powers out to the rest of the people in the realms, creating the first group of elemental masters. And around a millennium before Asphira got imprisoned, the first Ninjutsu master and King Mambo promised a fragile peace between the humans and Serpentine. And now we get into some new Dragons Rising lore. So at some point, the first Ninjutsu master foresaw an event that he called the Coalescence in a vision. So he went to the Source Dragons to ask them to use some of their powers to create the Dragon Energy Cores, which managed to keep the realms from coming together. And since the first Ninjutsu master feared what people would do with the cores, he hid them in 3 different places in 3 different realms: the Mother Garden, the Pinnacle of Crystals, and the Lava Waste. And assumably not too long after the Forbidden 5 was formed, and if you don't know who they are 5 siblings who are all elemental masters located in the wilderness, and they also created the Wolf Clan. They also created their own language and magic called Feroxian, and of course, the evil form of Spinjitzu, Shadow Spin. And to stop them, the Dragon Masters Egot and Rontu created their own technique, Rising Dragon, so they could counter Shadow Spin. And because of the Forbidden 5's power, the Dragon Masters knew they needed to find a prison even more powerful and permanent than the Departed Realm. So they went to the High Sorceress Ganalaria and asked her to create a spell so powerful that even the Forbidden 5 wouldn't be able to break through it. And that's exactly what they did. They defeated them and trapped them in a place called Neverspace. And unlike other spells, the spell to defeat the Forbidden 5 didn't go away, and it instead travelled the realms for centuries. And now it is time to meet up with the first Ninjutsu master again, because he has now had his first son Garmadon, who inherited the only power of destruction. And then his second son was born, Wu, and he inherited the powers of creation. And as the 2 brothers grew up, they went on many adventures such as when they discovered the scrolls of forbidden Spinjitzu, which led them to get imprisoned by the snakes, but luckily they were rescued by a snake named Asphira, who only released them because Wu promised her to teach her Spinjitzu. But that turned out poorly because Asphira used her Spinjitzu to overthrow the king, King Mambo. So since they started it, Wu and Garmadon steal the scrolls of forbidden Spinjitzu to defeat Asphira, which leads Asphira feeling betrayed, and she declares her revenge on Wu. And then at some point they move into their home, the monastery of Spinjitzu, and one day when Wu and Garmadon are play fighting, Wu's sword goes over the monastery's walls and he is too scared to go and get it. So Garmadon climbed the wall to fetch it, where he got bitten by a snake called the Great Devourer, who was controlled by the Overlord, which slowly starts to corrupt Garmadon. This causes Garmadon to start hating his father, and he also hates Wu, blaming him for everything that has now happened. But at this point, Garmadon isn't fully corrupted, so the first Spinjitzu Master sends the brothers on a quest to the Northern Ocean to find a tea plant that can cure Garmadon from the Devourer's venom. On their journey, they enter a dark forest and encounter a wild beast, but luckily they are saved by a mysterious cat lady named Ninjago. And it just so turns out that Ninjago used to be a student of the first Spinjitzu Master, and she was actually kicked out of the monastery, stealing one of the first Spinjitzu Master's favorite katanas. Anyway, they also go on other adventures to the lair of Tanabrax, the Maze of the Sphinx, and Chroma's Clutches, which are all books that you can buy right now. And now, some time has passed, and we are now roughly 40 years away from when the actual show has started. So around this time, Dr. Julian builds the first Dendroid, obviously being Zane, and he also of course built the Falcon as well. And around this time, Garmadon has started to train under Master Chen along with Klaus. And Chen also persuades Garmadon to sign a love letter that Wu wrote for Misako and pretend that it was his own. And while Garmadon has gone away, Wu starts his own hobbies like training the young Master of Wind Moro, as Wu thinks he could become the Green Ninja. But short story even shorter, the weapons didn't respond to Moro, so he cracks it and tries to prove Destiny wrong, and this eventually leads him to his demise. And presumably not too long after this event, a conflict between the humans and the Serpentine started to come up due to them all being fearful over the curse of the Golden Master. So Chen, being Chen, takes advantage of this situation, and he tricks both sides into fighting each other just for his entertainment. And now we are in one of Ninjago's most interesting time periods, the Serpentine Wars. So with Chen starting the whole war, Garmadon gets upset with Chen and leaves him to fight alongside his brother Wu. But as we learn in the fairly recent Shadowspin comic, before Garmadon leaves, Chen tells Garmadon about the Forbidden Five and also gives him an amulet and a map to the wilderness. So with Wu's disapproval, Garmadon uses the amulet to travel to the wilderness, and upon traveling to the wilderness, he ends up at the Shadow Dojo, where he picks up the Mallet of Shattering and throws it in a fit of rage as he feels that Chen has just lied to him. But he threw that mallet right into the Gong of Shattering, so he got sent flying far away from the dojo. And he lands near statues of wolf mask warriors, and some ghosts appear to Garmadon and tell him to take the mallet as far away as possible. But unfortunately, we don't know what happens next, because at the time of writing, the rest of Shadowspin hasn't been released. But after the events of Shadowspin, Garmadon joins Wu and the Elemental Alliance in the battle against the Serpentine, where the brothers eventually find the sacred flutes that will help them defeat the Serpentine and lock them in their respective tombs. So now that they are locked away, the Anaconda generals got sent to the Cursed Realm, and Chen and Klaus are banished to an island due to their involvement. And now we enter the battle of all time, the fight between the Elemental Masters and Crocs Anachronics, the Hands of Time. So this starts with Crocs Anachronics betraying Wu and Garmadon because they think they deserve to take over Ninjago, because as they like to say,
Time control everything.
And seeing as time is one of the strongest elemental powers, Ray and Maya, the masters of fire and water during this period, forged the time blades out of chrono steel, and Wu and Garmadon battled the hands of time and absorbed their powers in the blades, and then they create a temporal rift, and Crux and Acronix become lost in time. But at some point, presumably about a decade or two later, because Kai and Nia are now born, Crux makes it out of the time rift, and he starts to plot his revenge, first by taking Ray and Maya captive, since they forged the time blades that took away his powers. And a couple of events that have now happened during the time after the Serpentine Wars and the start of the series are that Garmadon marries Misako, and Milton Dyer created Prime Empire, and the first person was also trapped inside the game, Scott. During this time, Lily, Cole's mum, and also the old Master of Earth trains under Wu, and also defeated Griefbringer, and gives the Geckos and monsters the Blades of Deliverance. Now we have to talk about the final major event before the current era of Ninjago, the battle between brothers. So around a decade before the start of the show, Garmadon becomes fully corrupted by the Devourer's venom, and he tries to steal the weapons of Spinjitzu from the monastery. So Wu obviously steps up to confront him, and after a fairly short battle, the protection spell written on Wu's kimono opens a gateway to the underworld, but Garmadon gets struck with lightning, turning him black. Garmadon then battles Samukai, thereby becoming the underworld king, and Wu knows that this isn't the last he will see of his brother, so he hides the 4 weapons across Ninjago. And now we are at the start of the pilot, and I could start telling you about the events of what happened, but I'm sure that you would much rather just watch the show instead. And besides, this video is already probably over 10 minutes long, and if I continue to talk about the rest of the show, this video would easily end up being like an hour long. And since most of you don't even watch my videos for longer than a minute, I figured there was no point continuing on. But hey, let me know if you would actually like to see me make a video about the rest of the series in a part 2. But for now, check out my video where I yapped on about the realms of Ninjago. See you later, be ninja.